So thank you all very much for giving up some time for attending this afternoon. I wanted to just give a little bit of context before Sam starts to tell you her high performance story, which will take you through the run up to and her experiences at London 2012 into Rio 2016, and really how the concept of performance wellbeing sort of guided that journey and in her own words impacted her results in both those phenomenal global competitions. I'm Michaela, I'm one of the directors at Leading Edge, and I'm going to be here to host this afternoon and also to pose and facilitate some Q&A that we're going to do after Sam's told her story. So please do feel free to post questions and comments and observations in the chat bar as we go, and we'll do our damnedest to grab all of those and pose them in a few minutes towards the end. I guess we thought we'd just start with just setting the frame for the concept of performance wellbeing, and really, as we all know, there are many definitions and conversations about what does wellbeing actually mean. So we've just picked out two here. It's a concept that I suppose as perhaps gains even more traction over the last 18 months off a very sort of solid background over the last 10 years, and certainly the global pandemic has probably accelerated the conversation and the willingness for the conversation in the space of wellbeing. Performance wellbeing is the Leading Edge's frame in which we've really aligned wellbeing into the performance space, and we've done that based on our work with organisations like England Rugby, Southampton Football Club and Team GB, and it's led us to explore and create this frame which really positions well-being as a fundamental enabler to performance. They're not opposite ends of the continuum. It's not about a trade-off between we can either encourage well-being or get great performance. And that, you know, that continuum, that balance and fulcrum is true for leaders, for the organisation, and for every individual that works within them. It's a much more holistic focus, performance wellbeing, and it really is, as I said, something that we see as a core enabler. Now, many of you will know that the link between performance and wellbeing is very well researched. There's a number of reports and research papers that we've referenced here. But I think it's fair to say that wellbeing for a while has been stuck as a bit of a pet project of perhaps only the most enlightened HR managers. I think many of us would recognise first tentative steps, perhaps in the form of lunchtime yoga sessions, Wellness Wednesdays, downloading the Mindspace app, all those great initiatives, but they are quite tactical in their very nature. And I think what we've started to see, and is borne out here by some research from the CIPD Health and Wellbeing at Work survey from earlier in this year, is that over the last 18 months or so, we've seen a move towards a much more strategic and culturally embedded approach to wellbeing, a realisation that the organisations and its leaders' role in creating a culture and environment that supports well-being, engagement and performance ultimately makes sense. So there's a move away from some of that reactive, remedial, person-by-person initiatives into a much more holistic and proactive ingraining of well-being in culture, a realisation that the more holistic focus is going to have a much greater impact for us. And I think the impact of coronavirus has only been, as I've said, to fast track that clarity with more organisations than ever before really embedding well-being as a strategic pillar for focus. So at Leading Edge, we've created our performance wellbeing framework, which encompasses 5 elements of strategic focus for both organisations and personal focus for individuals. Its concept is around wellbeing in service of individual, collective and organisational achievement. And it's not about giving the ownership for that solely to the individual or making it the ownership of the organisation, but a much more collective engagement in the concepts. We've built it, as I said, from our insights working with global businesses like Mars and Levi's, along with the high performance sports teams and athletes, including Sam, who's taken a great part in helping us define and align these 5 components.
So I'd like to share with you what my sport is and what my challenge was, what my day-to-day life was as an athlete over the next 20 minutes, and then welcome your questions at the end. I was a modern pentathlete, and as Michaela struggled to even say it, most people struggle to know what it is. So I've spent a huge amount of my life explaining to thousands of people what modern pentathlon is. So please don't worry if you're sat there feeling a bit baffled. I'm going to give you a quick A to Z of the niche Olympic sport that is modern pentathlon, and then I'll crack into my performance wellbeing share. So this is me on the day that I retired from sport. That was 2 years ago this month. And I'd really had an amazing career, 10-year full-time career as an athlete for Team GB, winning medals at the Olympic Games, London 2012, world champion, European champion. I was super proud, and it was just time for me to move on and attack my next challenge and what I felt I could offer the world best in the next kind of stage of my life. But modern pentathlon for me started age 12. And this Olympic event consists of 5 diverse disciplines, and it takes place over the course of 1 day. So a modern pentathlete will start at 9, and generally we finish at 5, and each event is individual. I've got a short video here where it shows me training and competing in each of the 5 sports, and then I'm going to run you through with how it works technically on the day of competition. So this is me fencing with my Union Jack mask, which I loved wearing. I always felt so proud to wear this. And this is me fencing at the Rio Olympic Games. I'm on the left. And this is the swim event. This was my strongest event. For me, I absolutely loved the equestrian. I loved creating a partnership with a horse. It was the best part of pentathlon. And shooting is a real close skill, a great technical challenge. It can be really hard to keep a steady hand when you're feeling nervous and under pressure. And here I am running on an altitude training camp in the Pyrenees. I'd love to be there right now. And here I've won the competition, so I've crossed the line first. And this is when I became world champion in 2014. I had just gained my place at university, at the University of Bath. I was studying French and politics, and it was 2008, October. I was a good athlete. I'd competed at national level, done some international competitions for my age group, but I was by no means an international superstar or world contender for a medal. I'd watched the Beijing Olympics totally in awe and inspired, and thought, wow, I'd love to be there. It was kind of a real starting point in my journey. And what I noticed straight away was I got to the University of Bath campus, where I was able to study and both train with Team GB. And walking into the training facilities, I had a swimming pool, shooting range, fencing coaches, horse riding down the road, the whole of campus to run around, and a running track as well. We have a sports rehab clinic where you can get physio, nutrition, physiology, psychology, all these different components to creating a really amazing athlete within a really amazing team was right on my doorstep. And prior to that, I'd been back home in Lancashire, where I'd had to drive 40 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour to get to different training venues. So it was a dream come true to arrive. And I remember walking in, meeting our head coach, meeting the performance director, meeting the other athletes and all the individual coaches, and thinking, wow, I'm a part of this machine. I'm a part of this big operation that's taking place. I'd love to be the face of it and be the athlete who competes at London 2012, but for now I'm just going to immerse myself in this environment and really try and thrive, and become part of the team, really create my identity here as a newbie, and really find my place, and maximise my time that I can as an athlete. In Olympic year by 2012, I was ranked number 2 in GB, and that's coming from being like nowhere, and it looked like I could make the Olympic Games. Now, as a team, the policy for my sport was the last competition before an Olympics. So for us, that was the World Championships in Rome in May 2012. This was the decider over which 2 women and 2 men would go and compete for Team GB at the Games. Now, this is significant because at major championships, each country can enter 4 athletes, 4 men, 4 women, but for the Olympics, it's just 2. So that means that generally 2 really good athletes are not on the Olympic team and are really heartbroken and disappointed, and it makes that qualification for the Games extra difficult and really quite competitive. Now, for us, we were a strong group of 4 women, and you can see us there on the back row. We trained together every day, we blood, sweat and tears. We were friends as well, training 6 days a week, sharing hotel rooms, long bus journeys through Europe. It was, we really knew each other well, and we shared a passion, and that was pentathlon. But going to Rome, we knew what was at stake, and it was quite emotional, I think, and a huge stress challenge to us all individually. This looked good to meet our one performance target, and that was to win 1 medal at the Olympics. It looked great. I would say, from a kind of team coach perspective, at this point, some cracks had definitely started to appear within our team. And that was that 2 individuals were super low and super devastated, and the other 2 were on an all-time high. So on we went. We had 3 months, a fast 3 months ahead of us moving into the Olympic Games. And what happened there, as most of you know, is I had a fantastic day. It went really well. The Union Jacks were out, the crowd were amazing. I had just a whirlwind experience competing in the copper box, the Olympic pool, and then finishing at Greenwich Park. And I'll never forget that day, and the support of Team GB, wearing my kit, my Stella McCartney kit, running around the stadium, and just when everything comes together in the world of high performance and elite sport, you really just think this life's amazing. When it doesn't, it's a different story. But we were on a roll that day, and our collective input over 4 years had created an Olympic medalist. Something really changed though, and I think this is where the whole workplace well-being becomes quite an important topic to me, and why I really wanted to share my story on this webinar today. Because immediately after the 12th of August 2012, it was the 13th of August 2012, and this was a day that honestly I'd never ever considered. I'd never thought what happens after, because we've been gearing up to this one day for so long. We'd even had a countdown in the training centre of days to go until the Olympics, very typical for Olympic athletes. And then the new day began, the 13th of August, and suddenly it was, oh, okay, so now we go again. The challenge though was that as a team, we'd all changed. Yeah, we all looked pretty much the same, but we all wore the same kit, went to the same training venue, but in a real quite holistic thought pattern. We'd grown. Some of us had suffered. Some of us had had great success. There were lots of new athletes coming into the training environment, which is totally normal. And for me personally, my identity had changed. I'd become a world and Olympic medalist. I was no longer a student, I'd graduated. And So my kind of day-to-day life had changed. What I did as an athlete, I was asked to deliver talks, visit schools, go to award ceremonies, quite exciting things. Life had shifted for me. And I think ultimately we started to experience challenges to our resilience. So we would go to World Cups, B grade internationals, World Championships in 2013, and we weren't winning the medals that we had in the previous cycle, and something had changed. And with these constant struggles and challenges, and I suppose a lack of understanding, we all began to separate and kind of go our own ways. And yes, we were in a team, but we were suddenly individuals managing ourselves. The reason why I think on the bottom left here of the screen that the model that Leading Edge have created is really on point to my experience of both championing performance wellbeing and actually knowing when it just hasn't been present and been perhaps neglected, is that right in the centre you'll see in the blue resilient mindset. And for me, I believe that when you have the identity balance, habits for health, and the environment to thrive all in check, when you're faced with these uncontrollable factors as an organisation, and these moments where you just can't predict, that happen all the time in elite sport, especially in a sport like pentathlon, the likelihood is, if that's all in check, you can be uber resilient, you can face anything with your processes and strategies in place, you can stay quite strong in these very testing times. But when it isn't together, when there are cracks, when there's separation, when things aren't quite right, not the things that you can tick off on a list or you can write down on an agenda as done, completed, done, but a real feeling, a real sense of connectedness, synergy. This is where your resilience, I believe, will fall short. And for us going into Rio, something just wasn't quite right. Had we addressed well-being? Were we that team that we were before? The answer was no. And this did expose itself on the biggest stage for us, where it mattered the most. And I think in hindsight, that was always going to be the case. Now, there were 4 of us, 2 men, 2 women. And what happened here was that I totally cracked in the fencing. I had an awful event. The coaches just weren't on the sidelines as they usually were, and super robust with us and bringing us together and trying to get us going as 2 women fencing out there. And I walked out of the fencing arena in 32nd place out of 36 athletes. Nevertheless, the next day we arrived and we went again. And you can see me here running, and I've got a number 18 on my vest, and that's because I started the laser run in 18th place. So I swam my usual race. I had not such a forgiving horse. I actually knocked 4 poles down in the riding, which were expensive, and I entered the laser run in 18th. I just thought I have to give this absolutely everything, go hell for leather from the start and just see what I've got in my legs. And I did. And it was actually, it had an amazing singular performance there. I missed 1 shot in the whole competition, and I ran up from 18th to 7th place overall. So we fell short of our target here, and it was just the lowest of lows. And as an Olympic athlete, and maybe there's a similar experience in business, I'd love to hear from you all. There's nothing worse than getting on the plane with British Aerospace and sitting back in cattle class and then watching the medalists walk on through that lovely curtain into first and business. And that was the rule. If you medalled, you're up there. If not, back you go. And then, of course, we had to address everything as a team. But it was only after that competition that we realised that we didn't have open communication. We were very reactive in the problems that came up rather than just moving together, proactive as a team. The doors were closed a lot of the time. Leaders questioned change and new ideas weren't welcomed so much. And this affected our morale, and we just weren't so robust. So it's a bit of a downer to end on, but to try and explain it in other terms, it's such a difficult, well-being is such a difficult feeling or experience to explain. And throughout that 4 years from London to Rio, I was winning competitions. I became a world champion, I became a European champion. There were real highs where I managed to bring it all together. As a team, we were there, but it was just so hard to kind of keep consistent. And I think if we'd had some sort of well-being approach as a team, which sounds a bit strange when you're a team of sporty, healthy people, because we often think, oh, well-being, that's eating porridge for breakfast, isn't it, and getting your water in. No, it's more than that, and this is what this offering is from Leading Edge.
There's a couple of comments that have gone in the box with people starting to recognise and draw out some threads of some of the things that you were saying, and I'm sure more questions will come as we continue to chat. But one of the questions that I had, and I think Ian on the call also made a comment, and guys, if you want to put your videos on now, obviously please do, so that Sam isn't just staring at my face, because she sees more than enough of me on a day-to-day basis. If you're happier on video, blank wall, that's absolutely fine too. But the question was, you know, with hindsight, and you've absolutely mentioned that, you know, the coaching and the leaders of the sport have made some significant changes now. Looking back, what do you think could have been done differently in the period between London and Rio by the coaches as leaders of the sport? What do you think now with hindsight?
Hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? And we all kick ourselves when we have that moment after an event to consider. But really, I just think at that time, it just wasn't clear for me. And I think I needed to be able to articulate my needs openly to the leaders. And these are people, I mean, our performance director dictated who got funded and who didn't, who was paid and who wasn't. And this was my dream. You know, I couldn't imagine it being turned away. And athletes do get turned away. You're told you're no longer on a contract, you're leaving. It's a little bit different to being employed. So there was a bit of a fear factor. And so the word well-being just didn't come into it at all. And I think maybe having a place to go, or knowing that I could speak to the director, my leader, in a very honest and open fashion, about how I was feeling, my experience, would have maybe helped that communication and understanding.